With just days away until the start of NFL free agency, the Chiefs have major decisions. Does Brett Veach have any answers for us? Let's talk about it.
Hey, what's good, y'all? It's your boy JD6 here. I'm with my man. Shout out to KC Sports Authority. Make sure y'all go check that podcast out, man.
You heard the man.
Welcome into another episode of the KC Sports Authority podcast. I'm your host, Keegan Russell, joined by Christopher Tenpenny with me. If you're listening to us over on Spotify or you're watching us over here on YouTube, go ahead and like and subscribe to the podcast real quickly for us. Again, on our way to 400 and 500 subscribers, and your support would be greatly appreciated for us here. You can also hit us up on any of our social medias at KCSA Pod. Well, Chris, we are just days away from the start of NFL free agency and the start of the new NFL season, and there's still a lot of questions to get into. A lot of contracts up in the air, a lot of players up in the air, and decisions have not been made. There's been rumblings and there's been talks, but we are now almost 72 hours away, as this is a Chiefs Red Friday off-season edition to the start of the season. You and I talked last week about the franchise tag going to L'Jarius Sneed. Of course, that was officially used. So we know he is on the cap sheet right now for $19.8 million. We also know as of late last night that Drue Tranquill has been re-signed. That was one that you and I and even CJ has talked a lot about, the necessity of bringing him back. And so the Chiefs lock him up for a 3-year extension. Very team-friendly contract, if you ask me. 3 years, $19 million. That has not officially hit the books just yet, as they're still working through the final details. And it's possible that some of that doesn't even happen until the start of the new year anyway, because he's a Chiefs player beforehand. They don't have to sign the paper today necessarily before it hits the cap. So, but it looks like it's going to be accounting for about $6 million. So here's where I want to get into today. We're going to go through these kind of quickly. Once the Drue Tranquill stuff hits, if it hits before Monday on the cap sheet, according to Spot Track, the Chiefs will have about $1 million in cap space, which, as we've talked before, we know the cap sheet can be manipulated so many ways.
Funny money.
Yeah, it's all fake. It's just sitting there. It's just a lever you turn, and then magically there's money there, and we'll get into that. But with that being said, nothing else can really happen until some other things go down. So the decisions we want to talk about here is L'Jarius Sneed and Chris Jones. Before we get into that, though, any quick thoughts you want to mention on bringing back Drue Tranquill?
Yeah, it was the only thing I was like 100% confident was happening this offseason, in a offseason filled with a bunch of different scenarios, whether it's like what wide receiver they're going to bring in, what's going to happen with Chris Jones, Sneed, offensive line, all these question marks. The only thing I knew or felt really good about was that Tranquill was coming back. So good to see him. It's more like a 2-year deal. It seems like, with the, 2-year, with the guaranteed money, if he falls off, they can get rid of him, cut him that 3rd year with no additional cost. But glad that he's going to be around for a couple seasons.
Yeah, I think that's a huge addition to bring back. We know Willie Gay was probably going to be gone. Tranquill came in last year on a very team-friendly contract, just like he is this year. He's getting a slight raise. I think it's going to be about $1.5 million to $2 million raise, somewhere in there. But we saw how effective he was in this defense, especially when Bolton was out. So I think you definitely like having that versatility of having him back. He's not quite as quick as Willie Gay, we know that, but he can play that outside role, coverage back if need be, and let Nick Bolton do his thing in the middle. So that's good news for the defense to start. Obviously, there's 2 other big guys on the defense we need to talk about, and that is L'Jarius Sneed and Chris Jones. The combine, this last week is the time to kind of shop around your players, figure out what the value is. We talked a little bit last week about what we think his value is. Is it, I guess my first question to you, is it almost a foregone conclusion now that Sneed's gone?
I wouldn't say it's a foregone that he's gone. I actually think the more that we've been talking about, the more that he's staying, because I think Rossini reported that the Chiefs were looking for a 1 for him, which I think is just a disservice to Sneed. I get it. Like, he had a great season last year. He's one of the only good corners in a good age range on the market. So, like, I get that there's value there. But like, come on, we there's other underlying things here that Chiefs King doesn't want to hear. Like, we roast Juan Taylor for all these penalties, and L'Jarius Sneed, like, part of the reason his yards against receivers look so good, like, let's be honest, is because he gives up the 5-yard holding, which is a fair trade. I understand that, but maybe there's a reason that the players, the writers, and the fans, he was left off all 3 accolade lists from 3 different groups of people. Nobody voted him in for anything. So, like, I'm not trying to down Sneed, even though that's clearly what it sounds like. I'm just saying there's a lot of other reasons apparently in the league why maybe he isn't considered the one or the top 5 corner like we in Chiefs Kingdom. And the Chiefs asking for a 1 just seems like the more likeliness that he's going to be here on the 1 year,
Sure.
which doesn't bode well for Chris Jones.
How much of it though you think is just the back and forth typical banter of an offseason? You start the highest possible asking price and work your way down. I mean, we always know that's part of it. Some teams will go, oh yeah, give us 4 first-round picks and we'll talk. Well, you're really not trading that guy. Because I do think Sneed, from a Chiefs perspective, we probably value him higher than the rest of the league. I'm sure, if you've listened to plenty of other podcasts this week, Chiefs content, there's been the talk of, well, maybe the rest of the league feels that he's a more Spags edition of L'Jarius Sneed than it is him as an overall player. So maybe you take him out of the system. He's not quite the same guy. Maybe another year in, coming back off of his injury concerns, that his handsiness isn't going to slow down, but maybe some other stuff slows down and that makes him worse. So I kind of think some of it, though, is you want to get the highest asking price possible to really see what teams are actually strongly considering L'Jarius Sneed. Now, we could probably sit here. I went through yesterday. There's about 6 or 7 teams that have, 1, the cap space to do a trade, but 2, an actual position of need. We've heard about the Falcons being a suitor, the Lions being a suitor. Heck, the Texans could use a high-end corner. The Colts have now emerged. There's been talks with the Steelers and apparently the Patriots. So there's all these teams floating out there. So I think if you are the Chiefs, yeah, you do want to start with a first because you want to find out what's the true competition. If you've got 2 teams really, really calling you back and forth, hey, we want him, we want him, we want him. Okay, let's get that first round pick done. Well, obviously, if the offer on the table was a first round pick, we know Sneed would be gone. There's no way the Chiefs would turn down a first round pick at this point. So I think some of that's probably just the offseason talk. Realistically, like we said last week, it's probably a 2 and a 4, a 2 and a 5, or maybe a 2 and a 4, and then the Chiefs send out a 6th round pick to offset or something like that. To me, I think the only way a first round pick seems possible is if it's a bigger trade of, all right, they're going to trade us their 1st and their 5th, and we're moving up from, maybe a 3rd, a 4th, and a future sec. I don't know, something that's going to be much more complicated to get done. So I don't think the first round pick is realistic. But one of the interesting things about the Sneed franchise tag is, take Chris Jones out of the consideration for a moment. They don't have to do anything with Sneed right away from a player perspective. The franchise tag intentionality of it is to extend the window of discussions on contract extensions. So that pushes into July. Once, I can't remember the exact date, but once somewhere in July, once that date hits, then they can't do any contract negotiations until the end of the upcoming season. But he'd be under contract as long as he signs his franchise tag tender, and then he'd be tradable still during the season. Realistically, though, we know for the Chiefs to do anything else this offseason, they need to know for sure, are they keeping Sneed? Are they trading him? Because if they trade him, there's about $20 million right there that they'll get back to use towards a guy like Chris Jones, that we're going to talk about in a second, or to go other directions. So I guess now the question is, when does something happen? You got the draft coming up in a little over a month, 6 weeks, give or take. But the start of the free agency begins Monday, and all it takes, in my opinion, is one team to go, hey, Chris, we want to give you $5 million more per season than what the Chiefs are, plus an extra $20 million in guarantees. So let's get this thing done. And the Chiefs are sitting here scrambling, going, man, we should have got this Sneed contract done last year. Why didn't we just pay Chris Jones last year? Now we're up creek without a paddle, so to speak. So what do you think realistically the time frame is on, as of right now, Friday morning, that the L'Jarius Sneed news breaks on a potential trade?
Yeah, see, I think that the Sneed stuff's going to wait a little bit longer till closer to draft, just because, like if what you're saying is true on them trying to try to drive up the value. Nothing drives up the value more than after free agency, seeing where your team sets, looking at where you're in the draft, and being like, just takes the Lions being like, man, we really need a corner. We don't like any of the corners we get at 29. We'll overpay and send the 29th pick to the Chiefs for Sneed. Like that's about the only way I see that happening that way. So I think Sneed's going to be around for a while. I think they're going to try to do everything they can. So all the restructuring stuff is actually, I think, what would go towards Chris Jones. And if they don't announce a deal Monday, he's gone. Like I feel that wholeheartedly. Like he is gone. There's going to be, the Chiefs could even be like, hey, we'll give you 4 for 120. That's a great deal, 30 mil a year. And it just takes one other team being like, hey, we'll give you 4 for 130. And he's probably gone. So I think there's a lot of teams like that. I think the Houston Texans are going to try to make a splash. I don't know if the Patriots would be in the running, but they have a ton of cap space. Like the Bears have a ton of cap
I
space.
wrote down about 10 teams that theoretically could go after Jones, with about 4 or 5 of them being realistic to have the actual cap space.
Bears and Texans feel the most realistic with the Lions as a third team for me, just because, like, think about it. Like, if the Texans and Lions are already trying to build off of a good last year. Meanwhile, I think the Bears are sitting there being like, hey, we're going to have Caleb Williams. We're going to try to make his job as easy as possible, just surrounding him by as much talent. So I think the Bears also makes a lot of sense. But either way, like, if a deal's not announced Monday, he's not on the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, I just do not see him being able to negotiate with the 31 other teams and sticking around in Kansas City. So
100% agree. I think if you've listened to C-Dot at all this week on 610, he's basically said, dude, you just have to hold out 4 or 5 more days.
Right.
Hold out till Monday, put all the pressure on the Chiefs, and you're about to get the bag. People are going to be rolling those Brinks trucks up to you saying, hey, here we go. Sign this deal right now. Forget about the Chiefs. You've got your Super Bowl rings. Come replicate that with us. The longer this drags out, I think the worst case it is for the Chiefs, which is why I'm getting a little nervous. I agree with what you said on Sneed. I think if you separate the two players, I actually think the best path forward with Sneed is to kind of wait, like you talked about, for his case with the Chiefs. However, the longer that goes out, that's still that $20 million in cap space sitting there that they can't use on free agency. So if free agency starts Monday morning without signing Chris Jones and with the signing of Drew Tranquill, they have about $2 million, which means they really can't do anything. Now, obviously, there's plenty of restructures they could do. They can convert some of Patrick Mahomes' base salary into a signing bonus. They could restructure Joe Tooney, restructure Jawan Taylor, and heck, they could even restructure Travis Kelce. If they did all of that, yes, they could open up about 26 to 30, $32 million. That would all have to happen, in my opinion, to sign Chris Jones first off. But then you're still in the same issue of, you sign Chris Jones, you got nothing left over. Unless there's another corresponding move like releasing Justin Reed, which I know CJ mentioned on his other podcast this week. I don't think that's realistic. They could also look to extend Justin Reed and convert some of that to later. So there's a lot of things to me that have to happen to make the realistic chance that Chris Jones signs here a possibility. And to me, it just seems like they're running out of time. They've had 2 years to figure this out, and there's still nothing. Even this last week, there's been several reports that, all right, a deal is very close. They're just finalizing the details, so it's already done. That may be true, but we know Monday morning hits and the legal tampering period begins. Teams can actually submit their formal official offers. The longer this drags out, the worse off it makes it for the Chiefs, because they're going to have to compete with big offers. So I don't know how confident I feel that Chris Jones is back today. I think a week ago I felt better. But that price tag just keeps going up each day it waits, unless we find out that there's really only 1 or 2 teams and Chris Jones goes, I really want the money, but the Bears, they're not going anywhere, even if I come there. Caleb Williams, he's going to be a great new quarterback, but are they going to be competing? I don't know. We don't know what Chris Jones really, really desires. He can look at the Lions. Yeah, Lions are kind of in win now mode. They've got most of the pieces around them. They just need to solidify the defense and get a dog. And Chris Jones could be that guy. So I think outside of those teams and the Texans look fun. They could be the up-and-coming team in the AFC, but you still got to go up against the Chiefs and the Baltimore Ravens every year. So the Texans, does Chris Jones feel like, all right, I can get the bag and win? Possibly. Or is it better off for him just going, you know what? That $5, $6, $7 million less per year that I won't earn, I still get to compete for championships. I get to play for Spags, Andy Reid, play with this team, and continue dominant. So that's kind of where I sit on it. I don't think the Chiefs go above 30 million max. And even to me, that seems high. And I just feel like there's so many other things that have to happen to get that deal done that if you're going all in for this upcoming year, then I'm fine with it. However, I do think that's going to set us up the next 3 or 4 years poorly. We know Veach has been a genius with the cap the last couple of years, and there's a lot of things that they could do next year to offset some of this. But with some of the contracts they have signed currently and some of the ones that are coming up, it just feels like if you go sign Chris Jones now to the deal that he actually deserves, you're really going to be tight the next few years as far as other options, which means, yes, you have to really hit on the draft, but then you really got to hope some of these other guys can take a big home discount. So for me, I'm like, at this point, I'd rather see either Sneed gets traded, so we have that $20 million to factor into Jones to still give us some leverage after, or it's like Chris Jones walking free agency, still possibly trade Sneed, do some of the restructures, and now you got 25 to 30 million to play with to go sign multiple guys in multiple positions of need. Go out and get 1 to 2 wide receivers. Go sign a Christian Wilkins who might have 75 to 85% of the production of Chris Jones, but might cost 10 million less per year, 10 to 12 million less per year, or divide it up in a couple players. So if you were the guy making the decision, because the decision is looming, as this title is stated, what do you think that decision is? If we fast forward to Monday before free agency officially starts, if you were the one making the call, what is the decision the Chiefs need to make?
I think they're doing it right because the number one thing is try to keep Chris Jones. And if you get Chris Jones, you're 100% trading Sneed. Honestly, if you sign Chris Jones, Sneed's not waiting around till drafted because of the cap space. His value is going to go down. I think the Chiefs will take a late second, early third because they need the money and they got one of their guys back. Now, if that falls through and you've got this giant hole on your D line, we know that's where that money has to go to. That's why I always thought it was crazy. I know I'm getting a little off that people were like, we're going to sign Calvin Ridley, or when Michael Pittman or T. Higgins were, before they were franchise tag, like go out and make the big splash.
Mike Evans.
Like, yeah, Mike Evans, make that big splash. And it's like, they just won the Super Bowl with this receiving core. Like, obviously it needs a slight upgrade, but if they spend all that money on receiver, you're making it look prettier while having the same issue somewhere else. So like that never made sense to me because if Chris Jones is gone, you have so many other holes that you have to fill. If you trade L'Jarius Sneed as well, so you lose both, then you start getting into interesting. Do you address the left tackle situation? Do you try to bring in another corner a little less? Like you get into this kind of range to where I still think receiver, like outside of a Curtis Samuel type and maybe one other veteran guy in a draft pick, I really don't think that's going to be a huge splash play by the Chiefs. Losing both those defensive players allows them, though, to kind of plug some of these other holes that they have popping up.
Yeah, so obviously if both are gone, that is probably the best cap space scenario in the sense that they'll have the most money to play with. They'll be able to go out and address multiple positions of need. We could sit here all day and talk about if it's just down to the two, we'd probably lean on Chris Jones is more important for the defense.
1,000%. Not even probably.
Yeah, because he gets the double teams all the time. Karlaftis, as he's developing, and maybe he still turns into the Max Crosby type, but Karlaftis can't do a lot of what he does without that guy next to him taking so much attention. Sneed, really good. Can argue top 10 corner for sure. Doesn't matter if he made all pro or not. What he brought this year and this season was incredibly important. A lot of, though, what he did could be results of the defensive line having the second most pressures in the NFL and the second most sacks in the NFL. And Chris Jones is a big part of that. Without Chris Jones, you have to replicate that somewhere along the line. Maybe the Chiefs would look at switching it up and they have a rotation of outside pass rushers and they find something else in the middle there. But it all starts with the trenches. And I think if you listen to how Brett Veach talks about building a team, he's always talking about building it through the trenches. We've seen for 4 years now that they don't go sign a flashy corner. They draft and they develop. They draft and they develop. Dave Merritt's back. CJ's super happy about that. Dave Merritt's back because we get to keep the guy who's helped develop some of these corners. It just all signs point to Sneed is probably gone. in order to keep Chris Jones. Now, if Chris signs Monday morning with somebody else and the Chiefs can't get a deal done with him, then I think there's a very strong chance that Sneed's still back. And then they still do some of these cap restructures with some of the other contracts, so they free up some cap space because they still need cap space. They still the restructures are going to happen. They have to do something, otherwise they can't go sign anybody other than their draft pick. So I think the restructures will for sure happen. But if they let one of those guys move, to me, it just gives them more freedom to sign multiple players at multiple positions of need versus locking into one player. And it doesn't feel like with Sneed, they always say where there's smoke, there's probably a fire. Right now, there's just not much smoke anywhere visible to see that a deal is getting done. There's been no terminology, no verbiage coming out of the Chiefs that says, oh, we're hoping to get a long-term deal done or this. All we've kind of heard is, hey, we're happy to bring you back at $19.8 million for this year. But beyond that, there's the door. If they have sent an offer out, we don't know what that is, but it's clearly not good enough for Sneed to get the deal done. So to me, that kind of says that Sneed's not part of their long-term future. They would rather that be Chris Jones. But one thing I did want to mention is, obviously yesterday, Bears young corner Jalen Johnson, a couple years younger than Sneed, signed his contract extension, got 4 for $76 million with the Bears and $54 million guaranteed. To me, that kind of now becomes the floor for what Sneed would get on the open market asking wise. Now he's a couple years older. We've talked a little bit about some of the aggressiveness could factor against him, but he is an experienced corner with a winning pedigree. So if Jones walks and the Chiefs come back with a 4 for 76, 4 for 80, 50 to 55 million guaranteed, is that a contract you would sign up for?
No, I wouldn't. I'm just like, again, I know I am kind of the outlier on Chiefs Kingdom. I know the absolute loves it. I do as well, and I know he's top 5 reason the Chiefs are able to win the Super Bowl this year. I don't need him back in Kansas City just because of that's their strength. They develop corners. And you know what? Maybe 3 years from now, they miss on 3 or 4 corners. And I'm sitting here being like, man, really wish we had Sneed. But I just don't have any evidence of that being the case. Jalen Watson played all year on a torn labrum and still played fairly well, like as a 7th rounder. So, like, I have no reason not to trust in Veach being able to replace Sneed. So even if, like, again, I would probably say the same kind of things for Darrelle Revis, Jalen Ramsey type, like those kind of corners. Be like, let someone else sign them because it's a strength of what your team does. So, like, that's a great contract for him somewhere else. 4 for 80. I think that'd be perfect. But
and I do think that, by the way, if the Chiefs did offer that, I do think that's something Sneed would sign. That's a good contract for a 28, 29-year-old corner that hasn't been the most consistent year in and year out. He's by far outplayed his $4 million contract he's gotten from his draft contract.
For sure.
But yeah, I'm kind of on board there. I love Sneed, love Chris Jones. If this was Madden, we would figure out a way to keep both. We would go in and fudge everyone else's contracts and pull Mahomes down $30 million just to have cap space to play with. But this is a real business. And at the end of the day, it just seems like for the health of the organization, the next 4 to 5 years, we know as long as Mahomes is here, that window's going to be open. But if you really want to maximize what this team can do on both sides of the ball, it just feels like these are two guys that keeping them severely limits what you can do with the rest of the positions of need. Because we still have questions on the offensive line, still need a left tackle next year, unless you feel comfortable with Wanya Morris being that guy. You've got multiple free agents on the offensive side. You need receiver help. You need a backup running back at somewhere. You've got other positions of need. You got to decide if Charles Omenihu is going to be back. Are you going to keep him? Or are you going to cut him because he's going to miss half the year again? And you could save about $7 million by cutting him. So there's a lot of things that need to happen. It just feels like if you sign those two, or if you sign, to me, it's the Chris Jones sign. I'd be okay with the Sneed one because we're talking about $14 million less per year on average. So that's more to do elsewhere. But I think signing both of those guys, you're basically doing what the Rams did a few years ago. You're going all in for one championship, and now you have to figure out how to be bad at multiple positions, or really hope you can get those undrafted free agents that become starters. So I'm on the side of let Sneed go, still try to get Chris Jones done, but I am not giving Chris Jones the contract that I think he's going to get because, again, I think with the way Spags runs this defense, I would be okay with, instead of that 30 to 32 million for Chris Jones, you go get a Christian Wilkins type or someone similar, and you're paying, maybe 20 to 25 million. Now you've got another 7 million to add somewhere else, or you figure out how to move up in the draft and go get a guy. Now that's a whole nother conversation we can have for another day. I think it's even harder for them to move up enough in the draft to make a big difference at some of those positions. But those are at least some of the options they have. Yeah. Any other final thoughts there? I guess what's your prediction Monday for Chris Jones? Because it definitely feels like whatever happens, it'll be one of the first things we see coming through. That boom, deal with Chris Jones is done. What team is that?
Man, my prediction. Oh man, it's kind of changed. I think he's gone. I think as of right now, this morning, I think Chris Jones is going to be on. I'm gonna say Houston Texans. That's where I'm picking. I think they want to make the big splash, but it will open up the Chiefs to be in the Christian Wilkins, draft. I think if that happens, I think we hear rumors of that fairly quickly as well, right away. So I think that's where I'm at, and I think they keep Sneed if that happens. I don't necessarily love that, but I also don't hate it. So like either, you know what I'm saying? Like, so I think that's where I'm at. Chris Jones is going to be gone.
Yeah, again, I'm with you there. If Jones signs elsewhere Monday, then I'm all for let's keep Sneed for now. Continue to drag this thing out. He's still going to have value later in the year. If you do want to move him, I think you still got to move him before the season starts, and ideally before the draft. But you're not in quite a rush. It feels like, to me, it just seems like if you want Jones, you got to move Sneed. And you got to get it done this weekend, or you have to hope that Jones has on paper agreed to a contract that as soon as the money's there on the cap sheet, hey, we're going to move Sneed, and as soon as that's gone, then we can sign this deal. But that's a lot to ask him to hold off on, because if these teams keep coming back with, all right, now we'll give you this, now we're going to add this on top, then at some point, as his agents, they got to go, dude, you got to take this contract. You can't hold off for the Chiefs to figure out their cap sheet. You got to take this contract and move on. My prediction, I also feel I'm about 80% he's gone, 20% Chris Jones is back.
That's a good number.
I do like the Texans of all the ones the best. I think Detroit's great, but I think with Houston, he's got a fun young defense. That he can. I mean, they've got Will Anderson's a guy. He's going to be a beast, and having a true, legitimate top 3 inside presence with Chris Jones next to you is going to make that guy so much better. So Houston, when they get on the phone with him, they're going to say, you know what Karlaftis did this last year with you? Will Anderson's going to do 15 sacks next year with you next to him, instead of Karlaftis getting his 10 to 12. So that's my prediction. However, though, I wouldn't be shocked if, because Jones is kind of telling these teams, hey, let me do my due diligence, let the Chiefs put their offer together, and then we'll compare it. I can see Houston, though, going out and signing Christian Wilkins right off the bat, paying a little bit more because they have the cap space, which might help the Chiefs out, because then it's Chiefs, Bears, maybe the Colts, and then the Lions.
If the Texans sign Chris Jones, just lock that in for the opening game. I know there's a lot of just which team they're playing, but how fun it's already on a possibility, because Stroud versus Mahomes day one on Thursday night would be fun. You had Chris Jones coming to Arrowhead fresh off there's no way that's not the opening game if the Texans get Chris.
And Houston's another team I think that would call about L'Jarius Sneed too. So
I don't know. I think
could they take both and really hurt us?
Corners. They like the young corners, and they didn't sign Steven Nelson to be their corner 3 stay?
I haven't double checked that.
So I don't know if they're in the corner market, but you never know.
As of right now, Steven Nelson is unsigned.
Still unsigned. Okay.
But yeah, they've talked about how their plan is to bring him back.
Gotcha.
But yeah, that's where I'm at. A lot of stuff could happen between now and then, of course. As soon as I post this, who knows? There could be random stuff happens. That's kind of how it goes. But yeah, I'm right there with you. I think Chris Jones is gone. Sneed's wait and see. I still ultimately believe both of these guys are gone. I think at the end of the day, And I think I'm okay with that. I'm coming to terms with that because I think it does open up the possibility for other positions, which of course we'll have to get into. CJ's got a long list of receivers he really likes and some other moves. And a lot of those can't happen if there's not cap space. And even with the restructures, if you bring back Jones, there's just not a lot to give out to the other guys.
Right.
And I do think Andy Reid really wants to beef up that offense this year. I don't think he wants to go through another season where he can't trust any receiver. And then, of course, they've got left tackle to figure out. So, yeah, I'm on board with you there. Is there any other free agent, though, for regardless of what's going on? Is there any other, if we wake up Monday or mid-afternoon, something comes across your scanner and says Chiefs agree to terms with so-and-so, someone outside the Chiefs organization, is there any player that just kind of jumps out to you? Because Veach is known to do these things quick. So is there any player you feel could be coming to the Chiefs Monday?
Man, I don't know, just because, like, again, if Chris Jones is gone, I really do think Christian Wilkins is probably a Chief. I think it's almost too good of a fit because his personality even matches what the energy that he brings his matches, and I think him and Coley would be perfect. I think they would get along just fine. So him, and then I think they want to get the receiver done early. So like, and everyone has their favorite mid receiver. I like Curtis Samuel. I keep saying his name a lot. I think 3 for 40 seems about right because that bump up. It's a lot like the NVS deal, just 2 years later with the increased salary cap. He's 5'11". He can play the slot. He does a lot of They're looking for someone that can play off Kelsey. And they have Rice in year 2. They're probably going to draft a receiver. Like, I think Curtis Samuel for the Chiefs fills a lot of needs. Mooney knows the system, and Gabe Davis shows flashes. And I
think
hate
Mooney's one you don't have to make a day one signing.
Right.
That's my thing is that as I look at these receivers, there's like 3 outside of the 3. I think the rest of these guys you can kind of wait on because they're all about the same.
I can't believe there's rumors with Tyler Boyd. Like, I don't want that dude anywhere near my locker room after the things that he spouted off over the last few years. Like, the Bengals lost the game because he wasn't in the game. Get over yourself, bro. Like, I don't want Tyler Boyd anywhere near this team. I don't care what he provides.
But yeah, my splash is there's 2 guys. If it's Chris Jones leaves, then yes, I think Christian Wilkins, we find out by 4:00 that day, hey, Chiefs have agreed to terms. Like, it'll be almost 5 minutes after the Chris Jones announcement that boom, Chiefs have agreed to terms with Christian Wilkins. If they go receiver side, I think the only one that makes the most sense that would feel like a splash would be Marquise Brown. Hollywood Brown, 2 for 24. Second year is not guaranteed. First year incentivized. He just feels like the only one that would need to be because I think Calvin Ridley is going to be a little bit more expensive than what we should spend considering where the cap is now. Marquise Brown's not quite as expensive, but has the dynamic capabilities. Again, I think outside of those 2, maybe Michael Pittman, which I don't think we're signing that because if his franchise tag is $21 million, I just don't see us committing to that. Outside of that, I don't think there's a receiver that you have to sign day one to lock in because again, there's about 10 receivers in this free agency class that are all similar capabilities. Plus, there's going to be cap casualties for the next few weeks too. So that's why I think Christian Wilkins is most realistic.
I know we went a lot longer, but like, what is the obsession with everyone with Hollywood Brown? I just don't see it personally, and I
think it's the speed. He is small. That's what I don't like about him. He's small, but he's speedy. He looked really good with Lamar on the deep ball. And he can take the top off, but he's not your physical possession receiver.
Okay, in 5 years, he's played at least 12 games or every year, and outside of 1 year, he's played in 14 or more. The other 4. How many times do you think he's gone over 1,000 yards?
I think he's once,
and it was 1,008. Like, and the
money. Was that his rookie year or his second year?
It was his 3rd year. Last year with Lamar. So like.
But we also know. Let's pause for a second. We know the Ravens don't pass for 4,000 to 5,000 yards a season, so there's less opportunities.
I hear you, and like the
Just playing devil's advocate.
Tyler down, like I get it, but like I don't want to have to play devil's advocate with a guy that has very similar production. Now he's 2 years younger, but very similar production. Let's be real, to Curtis Samuel, and is going to probably cost twice as much, or times and a half as much. Like, I don't know. I think there's better value out there. I've seen the speedsters stuff, and the only one that really worked was Tyreek because he's a unicorn. So,
And he learned how to run routes.
And he learned how to run routes. So, like, I don't know. I'm out on Hollywood Brown, but I get he'd bring a lot of excitement day one for sure.
Yeah. Well, there's plenty more we'd love to get into. Just haven't had the time. There's just too much going on. This time of year is my busiest time of year at work. But there's a lot of KU stuff I got to get into too. So we're gonna try and talk some more Chiefs next week. We probably won't do anything until after free agency starts. Don't want to waste time going through all the list of guys we want to go after, and then Monday hits, and then it's all right. That whole episode was pointless. So we'll probably wait and just do some more recap. But yeah, I think Monday is going to be one of the most important days in Brett Veach's career moving forward. It's also going to be one of his hardest days, I think, that he's ever had to work because these decisions are looming, and the decision to trade one, sign the other, or sign both and move on from both is going to have a long-lasting impact on the franchise. Again, we're all confident, as long as Veach, Andy Reid, and Patrick Mahomes are here, we're not too worried about how this roster shakes up long term. But we do know that either one of those decisions is going to have a significant impact on the future of this team. So we'll be tuned into that. Everyone's going to be locked in. Plenty of Chiefs content to go around across the Chiefs universe. But for us here, hit us up on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at KCSA Pod. Again, like and subscribe to the podcast. Help us continue to grow. Having a lot of fun doing this, and would love to see those subscriptions increase. So hit that subscribe button right now, share it with a few friends, and come back for more Chiefs content. He's Chris Tenpenny. I'm Keegan Russell. And until next time, guys, we'll catch you later.